Hey, what's up everybody, Rich Gaming Guy here. Today in this video I'm going to talk to you guys about my experience using Batocera version 35. So actually in the last video that I did here on the channel, I talked about whether or not you should consider updating Batocera. And the point of that video was just to outline the pros and cons and also show you guys what the potential risks are when updating. Now that wasn't tied directly to updating from 34 to 35. It was just in regards to doing general updates regardless of what version you're going from, and two, just the same sort of pros and cons and risks are present regardless of what version you're going to or from. And it also applies to other emulation platforms out there too. RetroPie is the same sort of situation. You never really know fully exactly what you're getting yourself into. You're kind of doing a little bit of a gamble anytime you update. So what I did for the sake of this video and just to kind of experiment on my own was I went about this two different ways when I updated to Batocera 35. I did a fresh install on a fresh hard drive. Actually, I did it on an SSD. So I flashed Batocera 35 into a SSD, and then I manually added in BIOS files and folders and collections and all that stuff. So that process took me about 3 or 4 days. I wasn't working, straight through on that. It was just a couple hours here and there, but I was adding in over 11,000 games. So I went collection by collection. Some collections are literally as quick as just clicking your mouse. Other collections can take multiple hours to fully add in all of your ROMs and files and folders and all that. So that was one way that I did this. The other way was I actually copied my current Batocera 34 setup onto another hard drive, and then I took that hard drive, booted it up on my gaming PC, connected it to Wi-Fi, went in through the main menu and did the update directly from that booted up. So that was a quick process. That took, I want to say, a half an hour maybe, give or take. And I wanted to compare what the experience was like regardless of which route you take. Do you end up with the same result in the end? And in my experience, and again, this is just my experience, and before I dive into all this further, I do want to say everybody likely is going to experience slight differences because with Batocera, we're using Batocera on a bunch of different PCs or setups out there. When you're talking about something like RetroPie with a Raspberry Pi 4, as long as you're using the same model, because there's 3 different models out there for Raspberry Pi 4, you're going to pretty much be in line with what everybody else's experience is. With Batocera, there's so many differences, so many variables, so not everybody's going to have that same experience. I'm using a HP Pavilion gaming PC, for example. Somebody else might be using a much lower end PC, maybe a mini PC that's capable of half of what a gaming PC is capable of. So there's just so many variations there. So when I talk about this experience in this video, this is my experience that I had. I'm not saying everybody's going to have the same experience as me, just simply sharing what I went through. So I did both routes here, fresh build as well as updating from within my hard drive, and that was Batocera 34 to 35. So when I did my fresh install, it did take about 3 or 4 days to get everything fully loaded in. Either route you take, you have to update your BIOS files because the BIOS file requirements do change on Batocera 35. Really simple process there, though. I actually did a video tutorial on how to do that. So if you have updated and you're trying to figure out how to add and update BIOS files, that video I'll put a link to in the description of this video here. Click over, you'll see exactly what you need to do. It's a pretty straightforward process, pretty easy. Start to finish, you're looking at probably 20 minutes or so to make that update from downloading everything, extracting everything, adding it in, updating, all that stuff. So that was easy, straightforward. When I tried to dive into games without doing that, there were some collections that just would not actually load up. I believe Atomic Wave, Naomi were the first ones that I ran into that issue with, where I realized, hey, let me do a BIOS check, see what the new requirements are. That solved that issue. But beyond that, when I did my fresh install and manually added everything in, I found that the majority of my games and collections were running really well. What wasn't running well was Wii U and Nintendo Switch. I couldn't get either to work properly. And I don't know as much about Wii U, but Nintendo Switch is not, emulation for Nintendo Switch isn't directly supported by Batocera. So that's something you kind of have to add in on your own. It does work. Not every game is going to work. The emulators used for Nintendo Switch, They're still relatively new. The capabilities aren't perfect on there, but you can get a pretty good experience on there. So my experience when actually going in with that fresh install was pretty good. I was able to add everything in. The process did change for adding in Nintendo Switch, but once I changed the process and made some adjustments, I was able to get Switch up and running on Batocera 35. I didn't have great luck with Nintendo Wii U though. That's one of those collections at the time of this video I still haven't figured out. I likely will figure that out. I just haven't spent a huge amount of time on there, but all the other collections I did find worked really well. So that was from the fresh install. When I went in through my Batocera 34 hard drive, installed from within main menu, updated that way, which took about 30 minutes. So 30 minutes versus 4 days, big difference. I rebooted, jumped into one game for each collection, and what I found was PlayStation 2 games weren't working. Obviously, I had to do that BIOS update, did that, but PlayStation 2 still wasn't working for me. Wii U wasn't working for me, which was the case going in through the fresh install as well. And Nintendo Switch was not working. I've figured out how to fix Nintendo Switch. You have to pretty much take everything out, put it back in with the updates that are required to get that up and running. So it is slightly different process from previous versions, which I've done videos in the past on previous versions of Batocera for adding in Nintendo Switch. But for 35, I have to do a video for that because the process, again, does differ. So ended up with less functional collections updating to Batocera 35 from Batocera 34, which wasn't a great experience because I think, at least from my perspective, if I'm updating, I'm hoping to better my setup, right? I'm not trying to update to then have to run around and fix collections that previously were working perfectly fine. I had no issues or disconnect with my previous setup where I felt like I needed to update to 35. The only reason I did it was purely to experiment and to see what Batocera 35 is all about. And I knew about the fact that they added in the software for Sinden light guns, where they're now plug and play, where previously you really had to struggle to figure out how to set them up, if you were even successful at all in setting them up. Personally, I was not successful, but I'm also not the most patient person. So I tried very briefly with Sinden in the past, and this was actually a couple versions ago of Batocera though. So not entirely surprised there that that didn't work for me. But that was my main reason for updating. I just wanted to see what it was all about, and I had kept my original hard drive with Batocera 34 on it, so I wasn't running the risk of, being stuck with Batocera 35 if, it turned out that it wasn't the best experience, which is how it actually kind of panned out for me. So I knew I'd be able to just revert right back to 34 and wipe my 35 hard drive if I decided to go that route, which in the end I actually did. I'm not currently using Batocera 35 because I don't want to have to jump through hoops to get collections that previously were working 100% perfect. Now with Batocera 35, I have to scramble around and try to figure out solutions to issues I didn't previously have. So that's been my experience. I just have created problems I didn't have before with Batocera 35. And I know that's maybe not what everybody else is experiencing on here, but that's my experience. So I'm just, again, simply sharing that. I'm not bashing Batocera 35. I'm just telling you what I experienced, and I have stacked collections that, have tons and tons of games in there. So if I have an entire collection like PlayStation 2 that's now not playable, that's kind of a problem. And yes, I did get PlayStation 2 playable doing that fresh build or fresh install of 35, manually dumping everything in, but that took me 3 or 4 days. Is that what the average person wants to do or is going to, do right off the bat? Probably not. I went 2 different routes, and I think that was a good choice because I can compare the experience going each way into Batocera 35. Now, I've highlighted a lot of negatives here. One thing I really like about Batocera 35 is the fact that, as I mentioned, Sinden light guns are now plug and play. That means we don't have to go through any advanced settings, although you do have to go into some settings and make adjustments because not every game is going to be a great experience for you the way that it, sets up automatically. I've kind of remapped different functions. Obviously the trigger function stays the same, but some of those extra weapon functions on some games, I've remapped those, or the reload function you can set to specific buttons or shooting off screen, depends on the title and the collection, but minor adjustments like that are pretty normal. Certainly not anything that is problematic, but really like the fact that we can now use Sinden pretty seamlessly on Batocera 35. So my feelings on this is that there's pros and cons, as there is with everything, as to whether Batocera 35 is worth it. For light gun, it is worth it in my opinion. For other collections, not really worth it, because you run the risk of collections not working anymore or needing to be, just wiped out and manually added in, or having to, customize configurations and all of that. It's just a lot of work. And going into it, you just likely aren't expecting that, or you're just not looking to deal with that. Especially if you're somebody that has gone and had somebody else set up your Batocera build for you, or maybe you got a build pre-configured, which is fine. But if you've done that, you probably don't know the inner workings of all these collections and emulators and all of that. So doing that update may just be way too much, may be way over your head, or just something you're not looking to get involved in. So that's the point of this video, just to share my experience, and then you can maybe gauge whether you want to do this or not. So light gun is great. So what I'm actually doing, what this is kind of giving me the idea to do, is I'm a big light gun fan, and I just purchased the Sinden light gun. I've done videos in the past, but I was actually using my buddy Al's Sinden light gun. So I don't have one currently of my own. I just got one with the recoil on it, so I'm really, really excited to actually test that out, because I haven't used one with the recoil. But I want to build a setup for light gun games. So the way I want to do it is, I like Batocera 34 better. I'm going to keep my Batocera 34 set up within my gaming PC here, because again, everything is working perfectly on there. Switch, Wii U, everything that I have previously set up works perfect. So I don't have any desire to run the risks of doing the update again and having that disconnect with certain collections. So I want to keep everything intact as it is, and then I want to now create an SSD. It'll be a small SSD with just light gun games. And on that small SSD, I can boot it up externally, or I can just wire it in to be another bootable device within my PC. And I can switch over to that for simply using light gun games. So I'll have Batocera 34 for everything, including some light gun games that I already have set up. But I'll also be able to then switch over to Batocera 35 on my PC and enjoy all those light gun games with the Sinden light gun being plug and play, because I found that to be a really positive experience so far. So that's my plan as of right now, just to kind of have the best of both worlds without sacrificing anything. I'll just have literally everything that I'm happy with into one build, even though I'll have to switch over to that extra SSD. But it's going to be a small SSD. I'm thinking probably under 400 games or so, but they'll be entirely light gun. So I'm not going to put anything on there that's not light gun. It's just going to be purely used for that. So that's what this whole sort of experience has made me want to do here, is just take the best of both, kind of combine them into my PC here, and I'll be able to just switch that over by changing the boot order, or if I actually want, I could just do an external USB connection to an SSD running 35 for all those light gun games. So that's what I've decided to do based on what I experienced here. Let me know what you guys experienced though. If you've already updated Batocera 35, has it been seamless for you? Have you had to do any running around, putting out fires with your collections, trying to fix things that previously were working perfectly fine? Or have you had just a good experience where everything updated for you and you were able to jump into all your games and game collections effortlessly? Like I said, everybody's using Batocera on different PCs and different components. We're all not going to have that same exact experience. So let me know what your experience was like. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you found the information helpful to you in any way. If you did, smash that thumbs up on the video. It's a huge help to me here on YouTube. But that's going to do it for today. Hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop for all future videos. But thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next video.